We have a special guest with us today, Tim, who is the parent of three children, one in graduate school, one a freshman in high school, and another a sophomore in high school. Tim, can you introduce yourself? And thank you so much for being here.
Yes,
Good
thank you.
morning, ladies. Thank you for having me. I so appreciate it. I live in the Midwest. I have the three children, as you know, and it's really been a benefit because our daughter is 24. She's in grad school, and that helps the boys when it comes to looking ahead for college or even high school when they were back in grade school. My wife and I had been married for 15 years. Unfortunately, she passed away in 2020 with breast cancer. So I find myself being a single dad. I'm a graphic designer, creative director by trade. I also have a podcast called Journey to Grateful, and that is trying to help people who have experienced loss and go through grief. And its mission is really to kind of pull back the curtain on grief and make it a little bit more commonplace to discuss. It helps people that are going through grief, but it also provides some key elements and some information for those people who are supporting others who are going through grief. And then recently, last November, I purchased a property down in Florida, and now I am an Airbnb host. So that's been kind of an exciting and interesting journey as well. So that is basically about me.
Wow,
Thank you.
that's
That
awesome.
sounds like an incredible project that you're working on. So,
It is. It's kind of a mission, but it also helps me an awful lot. It helps me have an outlet. It allows me to talk to others who are going through what I am or have gone ahead of me, and they offer me as much benefit and guidance as I can for others. And really, it came about because when I went to my first bereavement group, I was amazed at how much I was going through that just felt like I was the only one.
Mm.
And then during the bereavement group, discovered so many people in different places of the grief had been experiencing or had experienced the exact same thing. And I was like, wow, I'm not alone. And that's really what it's all about.
doesn't it
Yeah,
feel that way though? You
It
know, when
does.
you feel like your loss is bigger than or more in not in a comparison way, but just as in
No,
an absolute overwhelming way that your
absolutely.
grief affects you so much deeper. But there are a lot of people that are experiencing the same thing, unfortunately.
Correct. Yes. Too many people. Too many people. But we all have to stick together and understand that we are not alone. And that helps.
yeah,
It's
and
one topic that I have a hard time talking about for sure.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah, and
Yeah.
we'll absolutely put a link in the show notes to Journey to Grateful, so people
Thank
can
you.
find
Appreciate it.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So thanks for sharing that. So I guess I have the first question. So now you have a ninth and a 10th grader. So you've had to help your sons navigate high school, right? So
Yes.
when you think back about their experiences in high school, what have you learned about your sons through that part of their journey?
Well, what I tend to learn is always in light of a comparison with our daughter. And it also comes with a little bit more than just that pure comparison, because obviously, with our daughter, I had my wife to navigate this entire thing with. And my wife was the strongest woman I know, very smart. She was an engineer, and she was also somebody who would not wait for something. You have to be a little bit proactive, and that taught us all an awful lot. She has instilled that in all three of the kids, and it has provided us with the ability to just be much more aware of what's ahead, especially when it comes to applying for college. She would never let the kids kind of just sit back and go, oh, I'll just wait until something happens. No,
Mhm.
it's time for you to get out there and start asking the questions. At the very least, get the information. So it's been really interesting watching the boys go into high school because they, all three of the kids, went to a Catholic school, which was much smaller than the high school, but the Catholic school prepared them for high school in so many different ways. And in fact, my boys just yesterday were sharing a discussion together with how interesting it was for one particular class was teaching something. I forget, they were talking about some aspect, and my youngest son said, well, we learned that 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And that was really enlightening. That was fantastic. That's where I want them to be. I want them to be first and foremost engaged in wherever they are, whether it be grade school, high school, or college. But I also want them to be comfortable in knowing enough to not be afraid, and that's what that Catholic education has provided them. And then comparing the boys and the girl aspect of it all, boys are definitely different than girls on so many different levels in every aspect of life. And I do have, my oldest boy is a bit of a procrastinator, takes after his father, unfortunately, and yet he does bring to the party some surprising insights on occasion. Now, with their high school experience so far, their counselors are very engaged. So not only are they engaged in preparing whatever the next trimester classes are going to look like, but also just further ahead. He came to me just the other night and was asking questions about and explaining some information that he obtained from his counselor about going to college. And it was specifically about needing perhaps some more clubs to join because that really looks good on the resume, quote unquote, going into college. So it's great that he's a sophomore. He's getting that type of engagement. And thanks to you two, I've had discussions with him even 4 or 6 months ago, explaining to him how important it was to not wait until the end of junior year, for instance, to start considering college. And it's never too early to really have those conversations. It's never too early to start thinking about exactly where and what you want to do with that college education, because it helps you prepare.
Yeah. And something that we were talking about earlier that made me think of this is when you're having a conversation with a freshman, it's not a pressured conversation. It's from a position of empowerment, which is,
Yes.
wow, I can now have the time to better manage my time, to join clubs and activities, to do the things that I love, because my end goal is to get to a prestigious school or a mid-tier school or whatever that end goal is.
Correct.
You have that conversation that you have between yourself and a ninth grader, yourself and a 10th grader, is not a pressured one. It's probably the most beautiful and authentic one that you're going to have.
I think that you said the most important aspect there. You're coming from a place of kind of enlightenment and knowledge, not to be feared, because the more you know, the better the outcome is going to be. Whether that's a month later or whether that's 2.5 years later, you're going to be much better prepared, and then you won't be rushing around suddenly understanding an aspect of something you need for that resume going into college, and oh my gosh, I don't have enough time to do it. So it's great to have the experience with their school, that from day one the process is always geared towards that final goal of getting into some sort of college. And at that point in time, it doesn't matter which university or universities you are looking into. It matters as to how you are laying out the path in front of you to get there.
Right. And the sort of hidden agenda in it, even though the counselor might say like, oh, you want to do this so you'll look good to get into college, is all the skills he's going to gain from, interpersonal skills and leadership skills from being in these organizations that he'll then take to college. So he
I don't
might
think
not
that
be
anything
thinking
is
of
going to
that.
be wasted, right?
Right, right.
It's going to be a benefit, whether they experience it as an obvious benefit for themselves while they're doing it or not, that's fine. Later on down the road, it might become a benefit that they didn't even realize it came from something that they chose to embrace because they needed it for college. It's a win-win.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. So I know you're having these conversations about college, with your boys, and anything, and we talked about some things that have come up recently. Have any surprises, like what they bring home and start to talk about, or anything that you felt you had to nudge maybe a little bit that they haven't started talking about?
Nudging happens every morning when they look at me as though they are a wounded puppy and they just don't want to have to go to school.
Mhm.
So you're constantly nudging, right? But yeah, we've had many conversations, one of which would be what they want to do when they go into college, especially for my oldest. My youngest, for some reason, seems to have a pretty good handle as to what he wants to be. He most recently, within the last month, mentioned chemical engineering. And he tends to be the type of person who kind of seeks out certain things that suddenly start interesting him. Then he dives in, really immerses himself, and then he comes back to me with, "Did you know what the longest word in the English language is? It's actually a chemical." And then he explains it to me, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, that's amazing." So he's really fun and so much different than his older brother. And of course, they are 1 year, 1 week apart in age. So they are almost like having twins, and then sometimes just not anything like having twins. So his older brother just isn't quite sure what he wants to do. But when I look at his grades and the reports that I keep getting on a weekly basis with where he is just success wise, he seems to be really focusing very nicely on psychology. And his grades, as well as his interest, are just through the roof when it comes to that. So I would not be surprised if that's where he tends to want to go. But at this point in time, he does not have a very, very clear path, which is fine. I would much prefer that he find something that is of interest enough to say this is what I want to do maybe 6 months from now than to try to rush it. But both of them also need to understand that it's okay to go in to college with a goal in mind, with a direction, and then when you discover that it's not exactly a fit for you, to make sure that you are free enough to make some adjustments. My daughter, Karen, had that experience. She had started her college career at University of Minnesota, and she was going into business. She, in fact, got into the Carlson School of Business Management. And for the through the first semester, she constantly was providing us comments about the other people in the management program and how they were coming off as greedy, and she wasn't sure about this aspect or that aspect of it. And finally I was like, so why are you doing this?
Mhm.
Why I because that's what I chose to do. I got into this and I said, no, this would be a good time for you to say, hey, maybe next semester I'll take a look into something else that I'm interested in and figure it out. So she did that. And after the first year there, she did decide to come closer to home. And then she transferred her second year to UW-Madison. And she, again, still was on the business track. And she was also giving me the same type of comments. And me and her mother sat down with her and said, "So why are you choosing
Mhm.
to take these same classes?" And she said, "Well, I thought I had to." Now that comment right there, for anybody who's in college, especially if they're freshman or even sophomore, to say that's what I thought I had to do, they need to understand that there is room for making some shifts and adjustments, because honestly, it's the rest of your life. When I went to college and when I was deciding what I wanted to do, I made sure that I ended up doing something that I would love. I never wanted to be in a chose. So we explained that to her, and she had some speech classes and psychology also that she liked. So she ended up double majoring in psychology and speech therapy. And now she's in a grad school at Marquette for speech therapy. So her adjustment and her ability to understand how important it was to not only go to college, not only to get through college and get a degree, but to also get one that actually spoke to you, that actually excited you,
Mhm.
made all the difference in the world. I can't imagine where she would be and what type of a person she would be for herself if she stuck to business management. It would not have been good.
Right, or how
So
well she would have done.
yeah,
She
absolutely.
like terrible grades if you're not, if every day and every class is a grind because you just don't feel it, that makes college so much harder.
Yeah, her
Mm.
terrible grades would have been like B minus, and she would have thought that was the worst thing in the world. So unfortunately, she probably would have done okay, but she would have hated it. Yeah, she
Right.
would have definitely hated it.
My husband is a really good example of what you're saying, where he is the son of a local family doctor. His
Mm,
dad unfortunately passed away when he was young, but his dad was the local physician, and he's the oldest of four. He was supposed to follow in his dad's
of
footsteps.
course,
It
yeah,
was
that's a
assumed.
lot of weight.
Very much so. And so he went to college in pre-med and he got straight A's, but he was a completely passive learner.
Mm,
He was flat about it, and you could see he was flat about it.
yes.
And then when it came to senior year, he went home and found the courage to sit down with his dad and say, guess what? I don't like sick people. I, in
Wow.
fact, hate sick people. I
Wow.
don't like going to the hospital. I don't like seeing people sick. I can't imagine spending my life in a hospital and in this setting when it makes me internally completely balled up inside. So his dad, who again was very stoic, pipe smoker, like really
Ah,
serious dude, just got up and hugged him and he's like, I was wondering when you were going to realize that. And it
wow.
was the most liberating, experience that he could have had. And now he's a scientist. He's still in that type of profession. He's
Just not on
got
the
a
people side.
world, yeah,
Mhm.
world-class reputation, and he's just knocking it out of the park. But had he not had the courage to say, "Hey, this isn't for me,"
Fantastic.
I don't know
Yes.
what would have happened to his life. It would have been very, very different.
Yeah, and Tim, by you having those conversations and your kids seeing that,
Hmm.
Yeah.
the boy seeing that and knowing that you've talked to your daughter about that. I just think that's, again, Gina used the word before, empowering, but it really is empowering for them so they don't feel that pressure when they go to college.
Absolutely. It's important to get a career that can provide you with a decent living, and then you can move forward that way. Yeah, that's all well and good. But my gosh, how wonderful is it to be able to go to work with people or a organization that you actually like, and how awful is the alternative? It's not worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can tell people that are doing their
Oh yeah.
profession for the right reasons and for
Oh
the
yeah.
wrong reasons. It's so
Yep.
obvious.
Yep. Absolutely.
So, yeah, on the front end, as a parent of a ninth and 10th grader, you would most definitely want to put in their head that that eventually can happen, that you can eventually change your mind, that you can pivot. But getting a really strong foundation during the ninth, 10th, 11th grade years is what's going to give you the ability to pivot. And you're not going to be trapped into one paradigm or another, which is something that I think students need to hear at the onset.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Being able to understand that it's okay, but also being able to understand that there are tools, or there are ways to actually do it and do it successfully. When I started college, I started in the architecture field. And after the first year, I learned the word trigonometry, and I was just scared. And I still love, to this day, I love architecture. But yeah, I thankfully had a counselor, and we talked, and I explained to her what my dislike was at the time. And she said, "Well, you're creative. Have you considered visual art?" And I was like, "Well, what's this visual art thing?" And then that turned into graphic design, and away we go. So yeah, you never know. And that's also another important aspect. I want my boys, just as our daughter did, I want them to have a couple of classes that they take, just to take it, just to
Yes.
experience it, just to see what if and what's it all about. You want to take a photography class? Go take a photography class and find out, because maybe you find out that that is your love, or maybe it's theater, or maybe it is something that you otherwise never would have, but all of a sudden, hey, this is offered at school. Heck, it could be even a club that could turn you on to something else. My youngest is on the robotics team. There's actually 5 robotics teams in our school, so it's quite diverse and quite extensive. And they started out in robotics in grade school, actually 5th grade. My oldest ended up only doing it, I think, 1 year. My youngest did it the entire time and still loves it. And it just shows you that also, if you have siblings that are that close together, or children that are that close together, do not treat them the same way. They are definitely different people. And thankfully, my boys have shown that so many times, that they are drastically different people at times and very similar at other times. Heck, when they were toddlers, we dressed them like twins, and everybody thought they were twins. But it was just easier. If one went away, we could say, we need to find this one, looks just like this one, but wearing the same clothes. This is what we're looking for.
That's awesome.
I have a question that we didn't have written down that
Yeah.
I would like to ask, which is, how did the loss of your wife affect your daughter's college journey? Because it sounds like she was, in timeline wise, she was in college.
Yeah,
Did she feel
actually,
responsible to come home or change her path, or how did that affect her experience?
it was it, there's a lot of irony involved in it, and honestly, I will answer first with a completely different viewpoint. Is for both her in college as well as the boys in grade school, the diagnosis was the one thing that affected them the most, because it happened. The diagnosis happened January of our daughter's first year in college. So
Mm.
she was in Minnesota. She had gone through a semester, was not loving business. And then actually, it was February, we received the news. So she was in Minnesota, and that long distance was a little bit more difficult for her. Now, when it came to uh, my wife's final ability to say, you know what, we've discovered that everything that we've done absolutely everything that we can. There's nothing more that we can do. That happened when the world shut down. So the pandemic brought everybody together, which ended up being a huge benefit for us.
Mm.
Otherwise, yes, that would have been a pretty big blow, and would have affected her in college pretty greatly. But March 13th, the world shut down. I think she had break the next week and then never went back.
Right.
And then that ability to be home, to be part of what was going on, everything was, and it's a strange thing to say, but everything was thanks to COVID, because that really helped us out. That helped out the boys as well as our daughter, because the boys then were doing school from home as well. So that happened, at least for us, in the best possible way. The outcome of that really was and ended up becoming a pretty big benefit. Also, we had engaged hospice on June 8th of that year. And by that time, the kids were all out of school. And then she passed July 3rd of 2020. So that last month, huge benefit again that they were off of school. They were into summer, and it was not an effect that we had to worry about. One thing that was important throughout it all, even though they were dealing with school from home, is even for college, my daughter received great support from her teachers and great understanding from them if there was ever a time that she needed to not be on a class call or to need a little extra time for something. And I don't think she but maybe once took advantage of something like that. But it was great that she had the communication with those instructors, with those professors, that they could reach out in a virtual way, in a very, very small way that became a huge impact for my daughter to say, if you need time, if you need something, let us know. And that was great. That was great to see that that could actually happen on the college level. Because for our boys, it happened and they were in grade school, and it happened for them. I think they were in 6th and 7th grade. And we were in part of this community at the Catholic school since our daughter was in 4K. So it had been nearly 20 years. So that entire community, I cannot even begin to explain to you what they did for the boys as well as for us. And they were also understanding from diagnosis through the absolute end, because the boys were also dealing with the diagnosis in different ways. And we were able to communicate with the teachers and the leaders there, and they really stepped up. So keep that in mind also when you're going to a college and looking at colleges. It's actually pretty important if you're looking at a college to understand what that personality of that college is, what uh, their character is like when you're looking at a college. Are you just another number, or are the classes a little bit smaller, or have you had a chance to discuss the possibilities of these classes with some of the professors, and are you getting a more personal feel from them, or are you getting the idea that, yeah, you're just another head filling a seat? Is that at some point in time will actually matter. And to have communication with professors for my daughter, even now when she's in grad school, it's huge. It makes a difference. That personal connection, especially after COVID, is what they crave.
Yeah.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that. I'm really happy to know that your daughter shared her family experience and what was happening with her professors, because many times students go to college and they think now they have to have that professional exterior, and a professor is not a human being anymore. They're this
Yes.
big thing, this entity,
Authority, right?
right.
Yes.
And they don't reach out. And I think it's really incredible because of her education and because of your family that she openly shared her experience with her teachers and gave them an opportunity to do the right thing and show the support when needed.
Yeah, she was not afraid. She actually had a lot of courage to be able to talk to them about those details, and that ended up becoming a huge benefit for her. And maybe this had something to do with it in a very minor way, but I also taught graphic design classes at Milwaukee Institute of Art and Design for about 20 plus years. And that puts us through 9/11. So I actually had a class, 3-hour class after 9/11 happened. And I think it was a Saturday class, and 9/11 happened on like a Monday. So, as you know, the world turned upside down. Everybody was in shock. We held class, and at the beginning of class, I kind of everybody was obviously very sullen and very quiet. And we came into class, and I said, "Okay, I need to be honest with you guys. We obviously know what has happened, and it's affected us all in many different ways, but a lot in a very similar way. And I would like your permission for just this next 3 hours for us to put that aside, not necessarily forget it, but to try to come together the way that we normally would. Because we would tend to, we were working on computers, but I was also usually giving them some uh, in-class projects to do, and I would try to be a little bit more lighthearted. I would tend to use sarcasm occasionally, and I wanted their permission to be able to be that way just for those 3 hours. And I explained to them if they decided no, that would be fine, and we would kind of change the format of what the class would be. And after we got done, because they did say yes, after we got done, I had several of my students come up to me and said, "You know what? I didn't realize that I needed that, but I needed that." They just needed some little slice of normalcy, even though the world
Mm.
was outside those doors was turned upside down. And that, in this case, with our daughter, is also just in a very similar way, something that is really important for the students to understand that person across the desk, that professor, they are experiencing the same thing that you are in my case with 9/11, or they can understand what you're going through. You don't know what they've been through, but
Right.
perhaps there is something that they have experienced that is fairly similar. They can understand because, as you said, they're human and they have a
Right.
heart.
Yeah.
It's important.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, such good advice, Tim. Just,
Thank you.
just and so appreciative of you sharing your story. I, I know we're kind of getting close to the end of when we have to wrap up, but I have a million more questions, but I'll try to rein myself in. So as you're talking to your kiddos about college and thinking about that, like, where are you getting your information? Like, what are good sources for you? Like, where do you as the parent, right, find what you need to kind of pass down to them?
Well, I'm going to disappoint you, and I'm going to say I really don't go anywhere for my information other than your podcast, in all honesty, and other parents. Because of the parents that we have become friends with throughout our history at the Catholic school, there are a wide range of siblings that were attached to those parents that, we became friends with those parents because maybe one of the boys had one of their boys or daughter in class, but they tend to have a similar situation where they would also have an older sister. So I have been very fortunate to be able to talk to some of those people and to kind of learn from them. And, they've gone before us. They've, even when our daughter was going into college, we had a very good friend who has, I think they have five, yeah, I think they have five kids, and two of which were older than our daughter. And then they had a daughter who was our daughter's age. So my wife was constantly talking to the mother. They had a great friendship, and she learned an awful lot. So she got some insights. She discovered the questions to ask. She also discovered the things to look for when touring for uh, the different colleges. Now, I don't know about you guys, but when I was preparing to go to college, I never toured colleges.
Yeah.
I looked at a couple. I think I may have applied to three. And then I got into the one that was the closest that I could stay at home. And it also had a great architecture program because at that time I was going to go into architecture. And it was kind of like, yep, that's where I'm going to go. But I never toured. I don't remember touring the college. I probably did, but not the way that they do now. And so knowing those little details to consider and to look for when you're touring with your daughter or son is actually quite important. And actually, my wife taught me that. I remember us going up to Minnesota, and there was a couple of things that she was very focused in learning and asking questions about. And I forget what the one aspect was. It was a question she asked, and later on I said, "Well, that was an interesting question." And she had indicated that our friend had suggested that she find that bit of information out about all the colleges that we toured. And I forget what the heck it was, but there's the insight. There is the perfect reason to not only seek out professionals that have a podcast or have written a book or have a blog, but also let's talk to the people who have gone before us and find out what their experiences have been, especially if they're just a couple of year difference. You have somebody that had a son or daughter who is 2 or 3 years ahead of your son or daughter. Go ahead and find out where they went, what they asked, how they liked this particular university, that particular university, and don't take it for, oh, okay, that's the Bible and that's exactly what I'm going to experience. But at the very least, you have more information going in, and you kind of know a couple of questions and different things, different details to look at. So that is where I am going with the boys. I'm constantly discussing with other people who are in the same situation that I am. But, at times, man, going through this, even switching from grade school to high school, man, I wish my wife was here because boy, oh boy, the appreciation that I have for all the questions that she would ask that I would kind of, silently roll my eyes at. I apologize to this day, dear. You knew what you were doing, and I wish she was here to help me guide the boys because it's definitely better when you have two people trying to do it. But either way, find somebody that you trust, somebody who will tell you the truth and to give you some insight and see how that goes for you. But also engage with somebody like you guys because you guys have different experiences than parents. Parents, our focus and our view is much more narrow. Your focus and view, as well as the knowledge that you bring to the table, is much greater. And I've often mentioned to the boys that we're going to be sitting down with Jen and Gina, and we're going to be having this discussion. So they're like, "What? Who? What are we going to talk about?" I was like, "Don't worry about it. I'll let you know when to be there."
It's like, I know them, so they're vetted.
Yes.
Nice,
I've checked them out and they're good. So that's what you could tell them. So awesome. Yeah. Well, those are my questions. Gina, do you have any other questions that you want to ask Tim before we sign off?
No, I mean, I think we covered more than what I would have hoped that we covered, and I appreciate the conversation for sure.
Well, I appreciate it too. This is really good for me, not only to be able to share information like this, but also for me to do it out loud where it kind of becomes fresh again for me.
Yeah.
Because obviously with just life in general, not even including the holidays, you tend to put things to the side. And this is a great reminder that I have to stop doing that. And I have to start, and my son bringing up the whole conversation he had with his counselor. It kind of kicks me into gear and makes me go, okay, we need to start engaging. We need to start thinking about exactly what you really want to do. Is there anything that you need to take a look at for the next trimester or even next year that you might want to just experience? And what kind of questions does he have? And are we in the place where he has access to the right people to ask those questions? I would suspect that the answer to that is yes, based on his conversation with me, but it's also huge benefit for my boys that they have our daughter, and our daughter provides them with an attitude of, well, this is what I did, this is what I've discovered was important, don't do this, do that because of what I have experienced. And that is priceless. Plus, she can also kind of knock them around a little bit and kind of force them to do certain things that they won't listen to me, but they'll listen to their sister. And I'm like, okay, throw up my hands and go for it. As long as the information's getting in, I'm okay. I don't care who does, who gets it in there.
I know, right. I know. You like she could say the same thing that you said, but because it comes from her, it's like suddenly like, oh, that's the truth.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it could literally almost be the
The
same
exact
phrase.
same.
And you kind of look at, wait, hold it. Like yesterday, we had this kind of same conversation. No, we didn't. Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yeah. Fun fact is a student can explore all kinds of academic disciplines in the summer if they just take free online courses. So if your son has an interest and he's not quite sure, like robotics, right? Am I going to really like that at the college level? You can take a free course on it and see if that is a topic that you would like at that higher level.
Well,
And
it's a great idea. It's a
yeah,
really
a lot
good
of students
idea.
I work with take advantage of that, and they find out they don't like something, or
Yeah.
in fact that they want to know more about it.
Yeah, I mean, it can give them the information that they need to say, yeah, you know what, I am so into this, or better yet, not waste their time because nope, this isn't a good fit. This isn't for me. And that's huge because
Yeah.
you have a finite period of time, kind of. I mean, you can go to college until you're 30, right?
Right.
But who wants to do that?
A basketball player.
Well, yeah, okay.
True. Yeah, and
Yes.
even taking the course, it may not cement anything, but it may give them even more questions to ask about
Yeah,
that area or branches.
Sometimes you just never know where that will steer them to. You
Yeah.
know, it's no worse or no different than just making sure that you ask the questions, and it doesn't matter who it's to or what it's about. There's no question that's a bad question because that question, the answer to that question might kind of jog something else, might kind of steer you in a different direction that you never thought you would. You know, you could be talking to a counselor, and if you ask a question, they might say, well, oh, you're kind of interested in that. Have you ever heard of this? Just like with me with the architecture story. You know,
Yeah.
I'm not loving this idea of math and all this other stuff. And well, you're creative. How about visual arts? And I'm like, well, what the heck is that? Bing, that question led to a direction, and there you go. There's the history. So yeah, always ask the questions. You never know what you're going to find around the corner.
Well, thank you so much, Tim, for coming on and spending time and sharing your story and talking about your kiddos. That was just, it was really great to talk to you and to see you again. And just so you know, and everybody listening knows too, that we have an upcoming webinar on February 5th. That's for parents of 9th through 11th graders. And we're going to talk about a lot of the things that we talked about here. We're going to unpack a lot of, the things having to do with reflecting on your students' academic career in high school so far and what they might want to do differently coming up and how they can plan. We'll talk a little bit about summer programs. Gina will give some awesome advice about, like she just gave here, but she'll say it again later. But yeah, on February 5th, so people can register just by going to the website and signing up for our newsletter, and then we'll send them all the information they need. So
that's fantastic. As you know, I was in one of your webinars. Geez, I don't even remember how long ago it was, but it was a few months.
Yeah.
And it was wonderful. It was the catalyst that made me understand that, okay, I got to start on this a little bit sooner than I thought. And if that's the only thing that you walk away with, which is not going to be the only thing that you walk away with, but if that is the only thing that you walk away with, that in and of itself is important.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. So I'll send you that 20 spot later for shamelessly plugging our podcast and our webinars. The check is in the mail.
Oh, I didn't know this was going to be such a good conversation.
No, it was wonderful. It was wonderful. So
well, thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. And if you got a lot out of this podcast and you're like, this is fantastic, check out the show notes for links to find out more about Tim and more about his podcast. And we would love it if you would go to keystocollege.org and sign up for our newsletter, and we'll get you that information about the webinar right away. So thank you so much, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it.